Does narcissistic abuse cause ADHD? In other words, can symptoms of attention deficit hyperactive disorder develop as a result of mental, emotional, and physical trauma? Let's explore this idea together. My name is Kevin, and this is The Royal We. Before we get into this very important message about whether or not narcissistic abuse causes ADHD, I want to let you know that I am here for one-on-one support. Down in the description box, you'll find access to my calendar where you can schedule some one-on-one time with me, and I look forward to talking with you. Now, I don't believe that we can prove 100% that narcissistic abuse causes ADHD. Case closed. I don't think it works that way. After all, we're not able to say that narcissism is a result of narcissistic abuse. We know that that's not true. Some of the people who have lived in the most traumatic of situations have grown up to be the sweetest, kindest, most contributing people in this world. Meanwhile, people who have had everything handed to them and had some of the best lives end up being the meanest, cruelest, coldest, most malevolent people in this world. So there's no way to say there's a direct cause and effect relationship, but it does make sense that symptoms of ADHD can be manifested as a result of mental, emotional, and physical trauma. Let's explore how these symptoms can manifest and how they can develop. Now, when we're talking about the symptoms of ADHD, the first one that we want to look at is the symptom of inattention, the ability, if you will, to not pay attention. This is what people with ADHD are notoriously known for. Now, in order to understand this as a possible symptom of trauma, or a symptom, if you will, of narcissistic abuse, we need to understand the basic trauma responses of humanity. Now, we all know the trauma responses of fight or flight, right? How many of you have heard of that? You either fight when you're faced with a traumatic situation, right? Fighting would be arguing back, hitting back, doing whatever you can back and engaging in the situation. Flight would be getting the heck out of there. Flight would be going no contact when you are faced with a traumatic situation with narcissistic abuse. But how many of you are aware that those are only 2 out of 3 potential responses, trauma responses? The third one is one that we don't talk enough about, and that's freeze. So it's actually fight, flight, and freeze, or fight, flight, and fawn, depending on how you want to look at it. So what we're going to do is pay attention to the freeze response. First of all, who would freeze and why? Well, typically freezing in a traumatic experience means this. 1, you don't feel powerful enough or strong enough to fight in the situation. And 2, you have nowhere to go. So who would fit into this category? Well, possibly a small child in an abusive home dealing with a narcissistic, abusive parent or step-parent or siblings. Maybe they don't feel big enough and strong enough to engage and be successful. And at the same time, they don't feel like they have anywhere to go because they're in their home. So naturally, the only other trauma response would be to freeze in a situation where they are being aggressively attacked by somebody who is narcissistic. Now, I believe something very interesting happens in the freeze response. I believe that even though the body physically freezes, the mind wants to do what it can to protect the body emotionally, physically, spiritually. And I believe the only option is to shut down. And so there you have a situation where somebody's physically present, but mentally and emotionally, they are checked out. They're gone. Their mind is somewhere else so that they do not feel the pain of what they are encountering in the traumatic experience. And in this position where they're standing there, the yelling and the screaming and the trauma that they're dealing with just becomes a bunch of noise. It's not being processed. And I do believe that this can start to develop the mind's ability. If not develop it, it can at least start to perfect, you will, or use the ability to be in a situation but mentally not be there. And this would create inattention, the symptom of inattention. And if this is done enough, it can create a habit. of people being able to be in situations where they are listening to somebody but not hearing a word that they say. A lot of people look at people with ADHD and say that, they're not able to have conversations with anybody. And I don't believe that's true. People with ADHD commonly have great dialogues with people, but it has to be something they're interested in, and it has to be in a place where they feel safe. I strongly believe that. Meanwhile, there's certain tones, certain aggressiveness, certain types of behaviors and characteristics, especially of narcissistic people, where people with ADHD check out. They'll stand there, they'll pretend to listen, but they're not hearing anything. And this is where people who are narcissistic will be able to say, you're not paying attention to me. Well, of course they're not, because of the aggressive tone. They're checked out. And so I believe that this could be a symptom and a result of one of the trauma responses, the freeze response. It develops that symptom of being able to be present, but not listening. All right. Let's move on to the next one, which is the hyperactivity, the spontaneity, if you will, that this symptom of ADHD, it's the restlessness, the fidgeting, the constantly moving, and the ability to be on their own and be content. Well, this could actually be a result or a symptom, if you will, of trauma as well. Imagine a small child in a home that is toxic, where there's all kinds of drama, yelling and screaming. That child doesn't feel safe going from one room to the next, to the kitchen, to the living room. So they're constantly moving, and they develop that fidgetiness, if you will, just trying to find a safe place, a place where they feel comfortable, a place where they feel safe, like they're not going to get yelled at, not going to get cussed at. This can develop that spontaneity, that need to get up and go and be somewhere else. See, these symptoms make sense. And whether or not it's the root cause of ADHD, I do believe it's safe to say that these symptoms can develop as a result of trauma. They could be defense mechanisms, coping mechanisms, the ability to be stuck in a place without paying attention, especially when it feels threatening. And the fidgetiness, the constantly moving from one place to a next, because they don't feel safe, depending on who's around them, right? These are important concepts to understand. And if you know somebody in your life who has attention deficit hyperactive disorder, hopefully this video might help you to learn better how to deal with them, how to talk with them, how to address them, how to maybe change your tonality, how to understand perhaps the symptom of why they are so restless, right? Well, listen, I want to be a part of your healing journey. Down in the description box, you'll find access to my calendar where you can schedule some one-on-one time with me. We could have a telephone call, FaceTime, WhatsApp, video call, text message consultation. It's up to you. Also, down in the description box, you'll find access to Royal We Live Chat every Monday night and Royal We Fellowship every Saturday morning at 9 o'clock a.m. Follow me on Instagram and join the Royal We, and I'll be back with more videos for you right here on the Royal We.